Hi, I'm Tom McGrath, and welcome to the Satell Institute's Executive Session podcast. This is the podcast where we talk to CEOs, other business leaders, about corporate social responsibility, giving back to their communities. If you want some more information about the Satell Institute, feel free to visit our website at satellinstitute.org. I am thrilled today to welcome two guests who provide a really great example of a strong partnership between a company and a nonprofit. So with us today are Michael Costello, the CEO of GNC, the iconic nutrition and wellness company. Michael, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
Also with us is Chelsea Musial, who is the executive director of the American Diabetes Association in Western Pennsylvania and Eastern Ohio. Chelsea, nice to see you.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you as well.
So as I said, you guys really represent the kind of relationship that the Satell Institute really celebrates and encourages, in fact. You know, it's a strong for-profit corporation that works very closely with a nonprofit to make a big difference in the community and the lives of individual people. So I want to talk about that relationship. But before we get to that, let me just ask you each a little bit about, yourselves and your organizations. Michael, I know that you joined GNC as CEO, I think in 2023. Is that right?
At the end of 2023, yes, in November 2023
Okay.
to be exact.
And I know you had a long, successful career in business before that. So give us a quick overview of that, but also just tell us a little bit about GNC these days, sort of the lay of the land for the company.
Yeah, well, I mean, GNC has been in business for 91 years, founded here in Pittsburgh in 1935 with 2 stores. As I always amazed about that, our founder founded 2 stores in the middle of the Depression selling health food. And GNC, as they grew, really moved to more into supplements and protein powders, et cetera. We've been there 91 years. Love, I used to take products from GNC in the 90s. In the 10s, I sold products to GNC, and I'm honored to be now leading GNC because I strongly believe in health. I strongly believe that there's so many things we can do to prevent things by taking care of our health, whether it be from working out to taking the right supplements. And so, I get to wake up every day and help people.
It's funny, you and I were chatting before I hit the record button here about sort of the craziness of the origin story of the company, starting a health food company in the middle of a depression. Who would have thought that could have possibly worked? But
now we're in more than 40 countries and over 2,000 stores in the United States, .com, we're on TikTok, we're on Amazon. So yeah, it's I would love to go back to 1935 and ask them what were you thinking and how big do you think this could actually be?
Amazing. Chelsea, I think you've been with the American Diabetes Association since 2021. Is that right?
No, actually, even longer than that. So I started my career in the for-profit sector, but I was brought to the American Diabetes Association because I have type 1 diabetes and I was diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 2. And so an opportunity for development work within Western Pennsylvania and the nonprofit space with the ADA was very interesting to me at the time of my career. I just felt like I could offer a lot, both personally and professionally, with the business foundation I was able to build. So it's been since 2017, and I've been the executive director in our market for a little over 4 years.
That's great. And I didn't realize that you had a personal connection to this cause. I'm sure that makes the work that much more meaningful, for sure. Let me ask actually just a little bit more about diabetes, which I know is a diabetes, which I think continues to very much be on the rise. Give us a quick overview of the disease itself and sort of the cause you're fighting for at this point.
Yes, of course. On the trend that we're going, 50% of American adults will have diabetes by 2050. And so we have our work cut out for us at the ADA in what we're trying to do. And so the mission of the ADA is to support all people living with diabetes. So there are multiple types of diabetes. So that's where it can sometimes be confusing in the complexity of the disease. But diabetes is a disease with the relationship of the hormone insulin. So insulin is produced by your pancreas. Everyone needs it, and it breaks down the food that you consume into energy, right? So it gets the glucose in your bloodstream out of the bloodstream and into the cells and where it needs to go for you to function. So if you're living with one of the types of diabetes being type 1, type 2, gestational, or prediabetes, you are either not producing any insulin in the case of type 1 diabetes or not producing enough in regards with type 2 and pre-diabetes. And so our work at the ADA is to support all 96 million plus, it's a large number now, individuals in this country that are either diagnosed with diabetes or at risk for developing it.
One of the things I love it. I was like, one of the things I love about the ADA is they talk about their goal being to eliminate the reason for them to be here. Right. So really on that focus. And then where it aligns a lot with GNC is a lot of those folks in prediabetes can actually stop it and go back away from it. Like when you're in prediabetes, you haven't gotten to the zone where you can't really reverse it. So you reverse it by, things we love, right? Strength training, cardio, taking the right supplements, taking the right food, the mix of that. And so, that's one of the reasons why for us it lines up with it, because everything they're talking about are very similar things that we talk about.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the relationship between your two organizations. Chelsea, maybe kind of give us an overview, if you can, about some of the ways that you guys are connected these days, and that you work together.
It is vast and it is robust, and I can't understate like the relationship that we've created with GNC has kind of like transcended my career in like defining what like true corporate social responsibility means. I mean, they have been so instrumental in like all that they touch within our impact in the community, but it all began with a retail campaign. So our relationship with GNC started when their executive team at the time, it actually was prior to Michael joining the organization, saw the alignment that Michael said around prevention and just the disease state as a whole and the role that just overall wellness means. Because like Michael said, our mission's very closely aligned because we just want people to live well and be healthy where they're at. If you're in a pre-diabetic state, let's work to get healthier. If you're living with type 1, you want to live as long as you can complication free. And so it all started with a retail campaign. And that for us was a win. Obviously, that's a revenue driving event, but also the GNC team was so willing to kind of use their brick and mortar presence that we don't have to continue to raise awareness of diabetes. Like they have this vast, network of brick and mortar that, as Michael referenced. And so it was huge. And their team at the time was like, look, you can sandbox with us. Let's try new ideas together. And that sentiment has rung true all the way now into 2026. And so GNC supports us in our large fundraising campaigns. We have events called like a step out walk, which is like what you would imagine is like our large traditional fundraising campaign. But our programmatic support, we offer, education for kids in schools to also offset, early diagnosis of type 2 and obesity. We have a state of diabetes, which is a convening of large employers in Western Pennsylvania that GNC sponsors and provided their chief science officer to kind of lend her expertise on the panel. And then we're piloting a new program together even in 2026. So I can't undermine their generosity and their willingness to kind of really step up to the plate with us and try new things, which is like all you could ever ask for in a partner.
Yeah, that really does sound like an amazingly robust relationship and very energetic going forward too. This is not something that sounds like it's going to fade away at anytime soon. Michael, talk a little bit more about that alignment between their mission and GNC. Why this is such a good fit for you guys.
Well, as Chelsea said, right, our message is we're here to help people live well, and that's basically our mission. And that comes in a lot of different ways, right? But when folks walk in our store with our coaches, our questions aren't, people walk in and say, "Hey, I want a protein." We're going to ask you, "What do you look for? Are you looking to lose weight, trying to gain weight? What are you doing? You have sleep issues. People take melatonin. Maybe you should be taking magnesium and others." So we train over 180 hours of training with our coaches in store, which is really focused on and asking questions of people coming in and seeing what their needs are. Because people sometimes don't even know what they need, right? That's where the expertise comes from GNC. But the reason why the coaches in store, the reason why most employees are here is because they love the mission of helping people live well. ADA, as you talk about it, is, trying to help all those different disease states, whether type 1, type 2, or pre, live better than without the information that ADA can provide. So that just lines up super well for us. And then, it's interesting. It was in place when I got here. And what we really did is we took it and said, listen, this is a great relationship. Let's blow it up. So let's make it let's bring it to the next level. And and there's not a fault of ideas, but what's great about it is that I do very little work on it. Right, the employee base is just really ramped up on it, and comes up with new ideas almost every day and different stuff we could do, and how can we do this, and how can we tie back to it. So it's really become a community in GNC about going after this. Um, Even to the point now, which not for the ADA, but we with our Susan B. Komen work, that they took a lot of the stuff we were doing with ADA, and some teams here are doing very similar fundraising going on. In fact, we're doing a hot dog sale today to raise money for Susan B. Komen, and we're the top raising fundraising team on Susan B. Komen and the top over on ADA. So it's great to see the employees really find what really resonates with them and jump in and help drive the community.
I appreciate what you're saying about that the employees, because that sounds like it's a crucial part of making this relationship work. But let me come back to them, because I want to ask a little bit more about sort of the relationship between the two of you as leaders of your organizations. Again, before we started recording, you mentioned that you just had lunch together. So I'm curious, how much are you in communication, and how much does having a relationship like that matter in terms of the relationships between the two organizations?
And all life is personal relationships in a way, right? If you don't trust the person on the other side, and if you're not working with somebody that you feel is helping to build it, it's difficult. And this relationship is seamless. Now, I'll agree that Chelsea probably talks to my chief of staff more than me on a regular basis. But whatever happens, as I said, we had lunch. Whenever I'm needed, if Chelsea needs me somewhere to call somebody, do something, she'll reach out to me, and we make sure we get it scheduled. Um, we're at a baseball game last year on a first pitch throwout. We're talking about doing an event with some high net worth donors coming up. So it's not episodic. It's actually just through the whole year.
Chelsea, I would imagine that having access to Michael and his team is pretty helpful, right?
It is unbelievably helpful, because I think that, like, to me, a true partnership is, first of all, like Michael said, it transcends layers within the organization. So, Michael obviously being the key leader, but there's so many other stakeholders within GNC that like lean into our work in various capacities. So we have, one contact that really keeps us, up to speed on the retail efforts. And then we have, like he said, the Live Well Foundation board is kind of helping to steward that like programmatic work. But, Michael also, generously agreed to serve on like our local board of directors. And so like, I just had a call with him yesterday that was just a little bit more like strategic, and me asking him questions about like what is best practice board management, and like, so I'm always grateful. Michael has always been willing to lean in and help how and whenever he can, and just to have that accessibility, like you said, is invaluable. And great leaders like Michael attract other great leaders, and so each year we, like, even going into this year 2026, like based off of some of the work that Michael and GNC did last year, like we've now been able to kind of like snowball that into 26. And like he said, the lunch we were at today was with like the other leaders that kind of stepped in a role that Michael did last year. So it's just it truly
And,
it is
and they're
really
doing it much
invaluable,
better than I did,
honestly.
which is the best thing.
That's all fantastic. Yeah, I mean that level of interconnectedness I think is so crucial to making these relationships work. And it sounds to me like also the best thing is that sort of everybody wins here, right? It's good for GNC, it's good for the Diabetes Association, but also ultimately good for the people that you guys are trying to help, right?
Well, it's society, right? I mean, if you think about it, in corporate social responsibility, I know people get caught up in that and say, okay, that's just companies giving back. Uh, but I think it really starts when, as a company, you have to think about your stakeholders as beyond just your shareholders, right? It's your employees, it's your customers, and your community. And so the way I think about CSR is like, I don't actually, there's nothing you'd find in our strategy about CSR, because it's just embedded in our strategy overall. So we don't call out, we don't have a CSR time that we're going to go talk about what we're going to go do. It's how do we support all of our stakeholders out there? And, it's employees, customers, and the community is actually very clear, shows up here with with the ADA and with the other things that we do.
I'm so glad you brought up this point, because I think it's something that certainly at the Sattel Institute we have noticed over the last decade that we've been in existence, is this idea that giving back to the community or philanthropy, it's much more these days than just sort of writing a check, right? That it is very much embedded in the operation of the business. It's business itself. Tell me a little bit more at GNC, sort of just examples of how that expresses itself. I mean, Chelsea, you mentioned before GNC's Live Well Foundation. Michael, just talk a little bit more about some of the things that the foundation is doing, or other ways that sort of CSR just gets expressed, in
Well,
your organization.
yeah. So what's great about our Live Well Foundation is completely funded by an event we put on every year, that the employees really manage and run, and is all volunteer based. And we raise about $800,000 a year. And part of it's for the ADA, part is for we do different. We donate to anything that employees are involved in. So it could be a junior hockey team, it could be somebody who's working with, um, a shelter. Sometimes it's with folks who are working on, uh, kids who are in trouble or kids who are at risk. So we really use the support of a lot of our own employees' efforts. And those grants, an employee has to be involved in a significant way for us to give that grant away. And so it's, it again encourages, because the money, you say the check is a check and companies have checks, but we have such expertise in doing things and making things happen that when we can lend the expertise that people bring day to day to the job, to also then help the community, it multiplies.
One of the requirements of joining the Sattel Institute is that, the corporate member commit to make a 4-year commitment to the nonprofit. Chelsea, I'm wondering sort of what benefit that has to the ADA, having that kind of longer term commitment. Is that helpful to you guys as an organization, and the way you plan and the way you think?
Incredibly helpful. Yes. And we were just talking about this earlier as well, because I think that, to really get any sustainable relationship off the ground, like it has to be a multi-year investment, in my opinion, because to be able, like I was just telling, like just from a brass tacks, like business standpoint, when I think about my team, like it takes, like, to be able to go and try to renew our partners every year, like, that's a big lift. Like, that takes a lot of resources for us to try to continually go back and renew and renew and renew. So when you have a sustainable partnership, we can better financially forecast, we can better financially plan, we can better build out our pipeline of programmatic support and where we can invest. And so I think that, from a best practice in nonprofit, absolutely. And I think that, we're lucky that GNC, was one of our first partners that was willing to do a multi-year. And it has been, like I said, it truly is like transformational in how I'm able to manage my market accordingly. And like I said, it allows us more runway, to know that we have, in this regard, up to 4 years of support, and how we want to invest that programmatically. But even just, with other parties, even 2-year deals help nonprofits. So that's big advice that I would give to my peers, is just having that multi-year relationship is makes it much, much easier for us.
It's kind of funny, Tom, because the reason we got invited to Satel Institute was I was actually sitting next to Regina Black Lennox at a lunch, and she was like, "Yeah, here's what we do, and here's what's going on. You have to do 4 years." I'm like, "Well, that's easy, right?" Because we've already been 3 years in, and we're planning, like we already have plans out for this year and next year. And I was like it was just interesting because she was like, "But this, it's a commitment you have to make." So she handed me an application right there. Um, be-
Fantastic.
because she's like, "Well, you already qualify. You get the invite." Um, I, and it actually made me think about it because as you from a business side, like yes, I plan a long range plan, right? I know exactly where I'm going for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years sometimes. And those are things in our control. And we think about, how are we selling to consumers, what new products we're going to launch, and what are we going to do from a digital perspective. But, never having worked on the nonprofit side, to understand that like a lot of that's not under control, right? They got to get a check that is written by somebody that they can't really forecast in the same level that you're forecasting, consumption. And of course, there's a lot of work that Chelsea does to like get the message out there. And obviously that's there, but it's a harder thing. Um, so, the idea that, hey, I want nonprofits to run more like for profits, right? In the way of planning and impact. Uh, and how can we expect them to have planning and impact if they don't have funding sources that are stable?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And again, the ultimate beneficiary here is the community that you're both trying to serve, right?
Yep.
That's really who ends up being the winner when this is a longer term relationship.
Yep.
Michael, let me ask you a little bit more. Speaking of benefits to GNC. I mean, I do a lot of these conversations, and people in your position, CEOs, talk to me about they do it because it's good to give back to the community. But we also invariably end up talking about ways that this has become helpful to the corporation itself, whether it's in employee engagement or morale, having the name out there in the community, employee retention. Just talk to me a little bit about some of the benefits you've seen back to GNC from having this kind of very deep relationship with the
Yeah.
ADA.
My easy answer is yes to all of that. But I'll tell you, some of the benefits are when we first did this, when I got here and we decided to really amp it up. ADA was running a billboard competition, which Chicken and the Sea had won before. And when we got into it, we looked at it and we said, "Hey, we're going to go beat Chicken and the Sea, all right? So we're not going to let them, beat GNC." And we rallied all the employees together, and the amount of events we came up with and the amount of things that started happening, and folks from different departments who don't normally work together were working together on the ADA, right? And we all work better when we know people on the other side. I go back to personal relationships really do matter. And so the fact that you have somebody's supply chain working with a merchant who's working with maybe the marketer to figure out how to raise this money. We went back, and the way we beat Chicken Seas, we always get samples in from a lot of vendors that want to list in GNC. We have a whole so chick, uh, closet full of them, and so we did a sample sale with all the employees, and we raised things, and we put like $5 out for this and $10 out for that, and people was like, "Oh, I'll pay you 20 for that. I'll pay you 20 for that." And we raised an incredible amount of money, and we were able to beat Chicken Sea that year. We'll beat them again the next year too. But it's a friendly competition. Andy was the step out chair before me, and I took it over. It's a very friendly competition, and the friendly competition here, they rally together, right? That connectivity makes everything work better. Like it makes your day better when when you walk down the hallway, you can smile at somebody and say, "Hey, Joe, what's going on? How you doing?" And even if it's not straight business benefit, everybody's a little bit happier.
That's so great too. And Chicken of the Sea is also a Satell Institute member, and maybe I'll have to have
Mhm.
Andy on to give him equal time to talk about this rivalry.
Well, he will admit that I have more employees. There's more employees here than he has, so he's batting above his weight. So if we do a raise per employee, he probably beats me still. Uh,
Well, you're a generous competitor. That's nice to hear.
And one thing I would just add, and I don't know if I've had this conversation maybe more with Becky and like others on Michael's team, but I've definitely had this conversation with Andy. Like one thing that's really big for me as the executive director of the ADA is that I wanted to make sure that the ADA brand and our impact like was seen and felt in a larger way in the community, because I don't think that everyone fully like the ADA has been around. It's similar to Michael. We just celebrated our 85th birthday. So we have like similar birthdays too. We were founded in 1940, and the ADA has just been this like quiet supporter of diabetes for 85 years. Like if you think of diabetes research, technology, like the ADA has touched it or funded it in some way, shape, or form. And so like a lot of what we talk about too is just like lifting the brands in the community. Like our relationship with Andy started because I saw a billboard that Chicken of the Sea relocated to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then like, we were having all these conversations with the GNC team. Like we're headquartered here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we want people to know that. Like Pittsburgh loves Pittsburgh. And like, so we've kind of rallied around this messaging of like our brands and lifting all of our brands in the city. Because like I said, if there's nothing else, like Yinzers and Pittsburghers love to see Pittsburgh win, and they're proud of their Pittsburgh brands. And so I have kind of strategically tried to lean into that and just kind of like celebrate the essence of Pittsburgh and like lift all of us up together.
Fantastic. Michael mentioned, the initial connection to the Satell Institute. Chelsea, I'm assuming that you saw benefits as well to becoming a member of the Satell Institute. So maybe just talk to me a little bit about sort of what you've seen so far, just in terms of becoming a member, why it's been valuable to the ADA.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that I was able to attend my first event last month, I believe. It wasn't that long ago, just a few weeks, early March. And it was incredible just to see the kind of the authenticity, the willingness to have such open dialogue. I loved just like the synergy between, I was sitting at a table with my peers of both the for and the nonprofit sector, like just the energy sharing, and I just think that there's an immense amount of benefit. And I really just believe that like a rising tide lifts all ships. And so if we can all together figure out like corporate social responsibility, then why not just do it for the better? We're all ultimately serving our communities in some way, shape, or form. And so if we can all leave a little bit sharper and a little bit smarter about how we can do it more efficiently, or what we need to do once again in Western Pennsylvania to make sure our economy and our people thrive, I just think there's endless benefit to it.
Well, it goes back to what Michael said. So much of life comes back to relationships with people, right? Just and sitting next to somebody, and you never know where things can lead from there. Speaking
Absolutely.
of where things can lead, talk a little bit about what you guys see just sort of in the next chapter of this relationship between your two organizations. I think you mentioned that you're working on some new initiatives. Just talk generally about what you think where you might see this all going.
Well, do you want to talk about the new initiative that we just funded?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that what they just funded, like to me, this is just kind of like a best practice example of like what the relationship means. And so, GNC has been funding us, like I said, for many years now. And I came to Michael and the team with an idea because we saw a gap in the market. And the gap that we identified is people who are newly diagnosed with diabetes. Oftentimes they're seen by a PCP. So we're seeing just with the rates of diabetes that PCPs are getting overwhelmed. And a lot of times people leave that initial diagnosis with diabetes, pre-diabetes, and they just feel overwhelmed and they don't know where to go. And so we went to GNC and we said, hey, we're seeing a gap in the market. Would you be willing to create a newly diagnosed kit with us? And so GNC said, yes, we're happy to invest in this. And so they agreed to a 2-year commitment specifically to the creation of this newly diagnosed kit. And so we'll start distribution. So we have 1,500 kits going out. So it's like an ADA bag with educational materials and a GNC Live Well water bottle so that the GNC brand is represented within. And I hope, just from a nonprofit standpoint, number one, I'm excited to see what happens with this, but it's a new program for the ADA nationally. So I hope that what we can pilot here in Western Pennsylvania with GNC's backing could transform into a program or a product that the ADA can then leverage throughout the entire country. So if we can figure out how a newly diagnosed kit works in Pittsburgh, why could you do it in Minneapolis, in LA? And that all happened because GNC was willing to invest in the new idea with us. So that to me, like, puts a pin on just like what this relationship is.
And the push I have with Chelsea is like, okay, now how do you make it self-funding over the next 2 years by getting additional sponsors and bringing different people
Mm-hmm.
in? And how
Mm-hmm.
can you then drive that impact, right? So great that we started it. That's the seed money. I think about it as like when you start a new company, you need
Yeah.
seed money to start
Mm-hmm.
because there's no data that shows the benefit yet. But once you start showing the benefit, once you start tracking it and seeing how and people's anxiety is lowered, they go to the right things, it's always fearful, right? If you go to the internet and search for anything, you just scares the bejesus out of you, right? And there's all different things out there and you don't know what's factual, what's not factual. So you need that expertise, in this case for diabetes, ADA, that's kind of calm you down and get the real facts. It's still not, I'm having personally had the diagnosis. I'm sure it's not the diagnosis that you're looking for, but with facts, you can then manage it and think through it and minimize the impact on your life.
That's such an exciting initiative. And Michael, I love that comparison to a new business, right? Yeah, you can approach this in the same way, and hopefully this thing will really scale. And again, the benefits become across the country, even beyond there, if you can get this thing to
Well,
work.
and I think that's where Satella Institute helps as you bring that nonprofit and profit together, is that I'm always
Mm-hmm.
thinking like, how are you going to self-fund that? How are you going to drive it? How are you going to drive the results on it? I'm not saying nonprofits don't, but I think nonprofits, you're going out and getting a check that says, hey, let's go do this. Well, how are you going to get the next check? And how you get the next check? And in a business, you have to create those KPIs that drive the results that show how you're going to keep getting funded on things. Otherwise, we cut projects that don't hit their KPIs, the key indicators. So, while I think it was a great idea from the ADA, we kind of lay over it and kind of give feedback about like, hey, how do you manage this more like a business? So the outcome is something you can blow up across the whole country because wow, it has this huge impact on the community.
100%. Great. This has been a fantastic conversation. Chelsea, Michael, thank you both. And thank you for this relationship that you guys have put together. I think it really is such a great example and so inspiring.
Tom, thank you for having us and allowing us to share, things. Obviously, I feel so positive about it and I love it. So it's great to have a chance to share it.
Absolutely.
And thanks to all of you for listening and watching. If you want more information again about the Satel Institute, we're at satelinstitute.org. And we will catch you in our next episode. Thanks very much.